We're about to take you on an exhaustive deep dive into the most magnificent miscalculations in the human story. We'll show you the meticulous tale of the bank robber who weaponized citrus juice for invisibility, the full transcript of the politician's panic as he worried about an island literally capsizing, and the detailed, tragicomic final moments of the president who gave an oration so long and so unnecessary that he genuinely died from his own ego. These are more than just mistakes. These are the 10 legendary failures that serve as irrefutable, concrete proof that common sense is not, as the name implies, common at all. It is, in fact, an extremely rare and valuable commodity. Let's brace ourselves and begin this lengthy, agonizing countdown. Number 1. The citrus-powered crook, MacArthur Wheeler. Let's kick things off with the complete unedited saga of MacArthur Wheeler, a man whose concept of criminal genius was, to put it mildly, catastrophically half-baked. The year was 1995, and Wheeler, a man of average intelligence but extraordinary confidence, decided that he was going to graduate from small-time hustles to the high-stakes world of armed robbery. His choice of targets, 2 banks in the great city of Pittsburgh. Wheeler's master plan for complete and total undetectable invisibility hinged on a high school science principle. Lemon juice could be used as invisible ink, a classic, simple trick. A note is written in juice, heated over a candle, and the secret message appears. Wheeler, in a stunning leap of logic that defied every known law of physics, chemistry, and criminal justice, concluded that if lemon juice made writing invisible, then applying it liberally to his face would render him completely invisible to the high-definition security cameras of the 2 banks. The scene that day, captured in chilling detail by the surveillance tapes, is a monument to Dunning-Kruger syndrome. Wheeler, wearing an absurdly misplaced expression of smug self-assurance, entered the first bank. His face was visibly smeared with a sticky, glistening residue of fresh lemon juice. He was, naturally, perfectly visible. Not only was he visible, but the cameras, digital sentinels operating on visible light, utterly immune to the invisible ink principle, captured his face in crystal clear, almost loving detail. He walked up to the teller, made his demand, and then, in a crowning gesture of his genius, he paused, leaned in, and smiled directly into the lens of the security camera. This was not a moment of intimidation. It was a moment of profound, self-satisfied arrogance, a man believing he was pulling off the ultimate undetectable crime. He walked out with a small sum of cash and the certainty of his success. He then repeated the exact same process at the second bank. Wheeler was, of course, arrested that very same evening. The police, dealing with an open-and-shut case, simply broadcast the crystal-clear surveillance footage on the 11 o'clock news. Tips poured in instantly. When he was apprehended, the police showed him the tapes. The sheer volume of his cognitive dissonance was so great that his subsequent court testimony became legendary. His shock upon seeing the crisp, unedited footage of his crime was demonstrably genuine. He reportedly muttered, "But I wore the juice," a pathetic, tragicomic statement that summarized his belief system. He was a man who genuinely believed he had figured out a cheat code for reality, only to discover that reality does not accept citrus-based hacks. This story has since been used in university psychology classes as a case study for belief bias and self-deception, cementing Wheeler's legacy not as a master thief, but as the patron saint of colossal, lemon-scented stupidity. Number 2. The Midas touch in reverse, Lord Timothy Dexter. Next up is the incredible, baffling, and financially impossible tale of Lord Timothy Dexter, a man who proves that sometimes you can fail your way straight to the very top. This eccentric 18th-century businessman from Massachusetts was the human embodiment of a cosmic joke, a walking, breathing paradox whose every idiotic business venture inexplicably turned to gold. He had the Midas touch, but entirely in reverse. Dexter's entire trajectory was a bizarre series of financial non sequiturs. He was famously uneducated, crude, and desperately sought the admiration of the Boston elite, who, in turn, delighted in trying to ruin him. One of their first major attempts was an elaborate and seemingly foolproof plan. They convinced him to ship an entire cargo of bed warmers to the scorching hot West Indies. The logic was sound. Why would anyone in the Caribbean need metal pans with long handles designed to heat up icy colonial beds? It was a guaranteed massive financial loss orchestrated by his rivals as a malicious prank. Wrong. The shipment arrived and was immediately snapped up, not for their intended purpose, but by the local sugar industry, which found the bed warmers' long, perfect handles and circular pans were ideal for use as ladles for scooping and stirring molasses on the sugar plantations. Dexter made an obscene profit. Undeterred, his rivals tried an even dumber idea, practically a proverb for redundancy. They convinced him to ship several shiploads of coal to Newcastle, a city in England famous throughout the world for its massive endemic coal mining industry. This was a guaranteed, undeniable loss, like selling ice to an Inuit. Except it wasn't. Dexter's coal arrived at the precise moment a massive and paralyzing miners' strike had completely shut down all local production in Newcastle. The city was freezing. Dexter sold his coal, the only supply available, at an astronomical gouging profit. Dexter's entire life was defined by this accidental success. He was so confident in his accidental business genius that he decided to write a memoir titled A Pickle for the Knowing Ones, an unfiltered look into his mind. The book contained 33,864 words, but had virtually no punctuation and completely random capitalization. The public, always eager for a laugh, bought the book in droves. In the second edition, as a response to critics, Dexter simply included an extra page at the end of the book, which was nothing but a huge block of random punctuation marks, periods, commas, question marks, and instructed the reader to pepper and salt it as they please. He became a millionaire by accident, a historical figure of profound financial idiocy whose biography remains a humbling reminder that sometimes the universe rewards the spectacularly clueless just to keep the rest of us humble. Number 3. Flat Earth Martyr, Mad Mike Hughes. Meet Mad Mike Hughes, a man whose entire belief system was as flat as he believed the Earth to be. He was a limousine driver and part-time daredevil, utterly convinced that NASA, the scientific community, and every geography textbook were engaged in a massive, multi-generational conspiracy to pull the wool over our collective eyes. He was a celebrity in the Flat Earth movement, a genuine believer in a frisbee-shaped world. To prove his theory, he decided to bypass the tedious work of science and do what any reasonable flat earther would do: build a homemade steam-powered rocket in his backyard to launch himself high enough to personally observe the flat, dinner plate shape of our world with his two own eyes. The scene, the Sky Cycle X2, is a protracted saga of near disasters, failed launches, and bureaucratic nightmares. He spent years scraping together funding, primarily from the Flat Earth community, who saw him as their technological savior. His initial attempts were comical, often ending with the rocket barely lifting off the ground or the entire launch platform shaking itself to pieces. Finally, in February 2020, with a camera crew filming the event for a planned documentary, Hiley launched his rocket once more from a private property near Barstow, California. The steam mechanism roared to life, generating immense pressure, and the rocket shot skyward. Tragically, But perhaps with a certain fatalistic predictability, the rocket malfunctioned moments after takeoff. A key support mechanism for the parachute failed prematurely, or the steam pressure was miscalculated. The rocket veered violently off course, its trajectory broken and erratic. Hughes, strapped into his metal coffin, plummeted to the desert floor below. He died for his cause. A cause based on willfully ignoring thousands of years of scientific evidence, mathematics, orbital mechanics, and simple photography from space. He became a martyr, not for truth or exploration, but for a truly monumental self-inflicted stupidity, proving that in a battle between physics and unwavering delusion, physics always wins. Number 4. The Island Tipper, Congressman Hank Johnson. You, the voting public, expect a minimum level of basic scientific and geographical intellect from your elected officials. Congressman Hank Johnson, DGA, however, decided to enthusiastically challenge that expectation in the year 2010. The setting was a serious, high-stakes House Armed Services Committee hearing concerning a planned military buildup. The specific topic was the logistics and environmental impact of stationing 8,000 additional Marines and their families on the small U.S. territory island of Guam in the Pacific Ocean. Johnson, displaying a stunning grasp of marine physics usually reserved for Saturday morning cartoons, waited his turn and then shared his grave concern with Admiral Robert F. Willard, the top commander for the Pacific Fleet. He wasn't worried about budget overruns, logistics, or the strain on local resources. No, his fear was far more profound, far more structural. He worried with deadly seriousness that stationing that many extra people, 8,000 Marines plus their families, might cause the entire landmass to become so overly populated, so top-heavy, that the entire island would tip over and capsize. His exact cringe-inducing line, preserved forever in the congressional record, was, "My fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize." He was genuinely worried about a floating island, an oceanic barge that could be destabilized by a few thousand people. The admiral, a man who commanded nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers, had to deal with this with a straight face. With a masterclass in professional composure, Admiral Willard managed to assure the congressman that Guam was, in fact, firmly attached to the ocean floor, and, as a massive tectonic landmass, was in no danger of flipping over. The clip of the exchange went viral instantly, confirming Johnson's legacy as a politician whose understanding of geology was less advanced than a common garden slug's. Number 5. The 64-yard sprint to shame, Jim Marshall. In the world of professional sports, the line between immortal glory and eternal infamy is razor thin. In 1964, Jim Marshall, the defensive end for the Minnesota Vikings, didn't just cross that line, he sprinted a glorious wind-aided 64 yards past it, directly in the wrong direction. The moment of confused glory. The play occurred during a game against the San Francisco 49ers. Marshall executed a textbook defensive maneuver, rushing the passer, and managed to force and recover a fumble. He was handed the ball, and in that split-second, adrenaline-soaked moment of pure confused, glorious chaos, he took off for the end zone. He ran hard, all 64 yards. The crowd was screaming, but their cries were a chaotic mix of elation and confusion. His opponents looked genuinely baffled. Marshall, with the conviction of a man running for the touchdown of his dreams, ran the entire length of the field, triumphantly entered the end zone, and, in a final flourish, slammed the ball into the turf and ran off the field, celebrating his game-winning, career-defining touchdown. The problem, of course, was that he was running towards his own end zone. He had just scored a safety for the opposing team, the San Francisco 49ers. It remains arguably the most magnificent, hilarious, and brain-dead failure in the history of American professional sports. His teammates and coaches could only watch in slack-jawed horror as their defensive hero gifted 2 points to the opponent in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Jim Marshall's name is now synonymous with the act of achieving something great only to realize you've done it for the wrong team on the wrong side of the field. Number 6. The Subway Marathoner, Rosie Ruse. Winning the Boston Marathon is a feat of legendary, almost unimaginable endurance. It requires months of brutal, soul-crushing training, a perfect diet, and superhuman willpower. Or you could just decide to do what Rosie Ruse did. In 1980, Ruse was declared the female winner of the prestigious internationally recognized race, crossing the finish line with then a record time of 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 56 seconds. The moment should have been one of pure triumph, a celebration of human physical potential. But something was glaringly, profoundly wrong. Spectators, reporters, and, most importantly, the actual long-distance runners who had competed for 26.2 miles, noted several immediate inconsistencies. Ruse was barely sweating. She didn't appear winded, exhausted, or even slightly tired. Her post-race interviews revealed she knew absolutely nothing about the mechanics of distance running or the training required. The truth soon came out in a series of humiliating discoveries. While investigators dug into her history, a couple who had witnessed the event eventually stepped forward. Ruse had run for only about the last mile of the 26.2-mile course. For the other 25-plus miles, she had simply taken the Boston subway, the Metropolitan Transit Authority's Red Line, traveling underground. She then hopped out of the crowd near the end, sprinting to her unearned, idiotic victory. She was summarily stripped of her title, a fate sealed when she couldn't remember basic details like where she had been standing on the train. Rosie Ruse became an icon of audacious, lazy, and monumentally stupid cheating. A reminder that the world rarely allows you to cut corners on the subway and still be hailed as a champion. Number 7. The Presidential Egotist, William Henry Harrison. Presenting the complete, tragic, and darkly hilarious biography of William Henry Harrison, the 9th President of the United States, whose entire term in office serves as the definitive cautionary tale about pride, machismo, and terminal self-regard. The date was March 4, 1841. The 68-year-old Harrison, a hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe, wanted to prove to the entire political establishment, especially his Whig Party rivals, that he was a tough-as-nails war hero, not a frail, doddering old man who should be carefully managed. So on his inauguration day, a bitterly cold and wet morning with a harsh Washington wind, he made a catastrophic, completely unnecessary decision. He refused to wear an overcoat, hat, or gloves. He then proceeded to stand on the dais and deliver the longest inaugural address in American history, a rambling, self-congratulatory speech, clocking in at nearly 2 full hours in the freezing, pouring rain. The speech, a painful oration that detailed Roman history and the complexities of the Republic, was meant to project an image of unshakable strength, vitality, and intellectual rigor. Instead, the prolonged exposure gave him a killer case of pneumonia, which quickly became fatal. He died exactly 1 month later, on April 4, 1841, just 31 days into his term. This earned him the somber but undeniably comedic record for the shortest presidency in the history of the United States. He successfully proved his toughness, but only to a small degree, certainly not tough enough to survive the self-inflicted damage of his own massive, tragically misplaced ego and theatrical vanity.
Number 8. The Premature Parachute, Evel Knievel.
Evel Knievel was a legend, a global phenomenon who defied death on his motorcycle for a living, constantly risking his life for the next big jump. He was the king of daredevils. But his most ambitious, most hyped, and most globally watched stunt became his single most embarrassing comedic failure. In 1974, Knievel planned to jump the massive Snake River Canyon in Idaho, a terrifyingly wide chasm that no motorcycle could hope to cross. A regular bike wouldn't do the job, so he commissioned a custom-built steam-powered rocket known as the SkyCycle X2. The hype leading up to the event was immense, bordering on hysteria. ABC paid a massive sum for the live broadcast rights, and the world was genuinely watching, expecting either a great triumph or a spectacular death. The countdown finished. The SkyCycle roared to life and shot up the launch ramp, generating an incredible plume of white steam and noise. But in a moment of pure, unadulterated, catastrophic comedic failure, the drogue parachute, the small stabilizing chute designed to bring him down safely on the far side of the canyon, deployed prematurely on the launch ramp itself. Instead of soaring across the canyon in a blaze of glory, the entire rocket was instantly destabilized, and its forward momentum was destroyed. It helplessly flocked over the edge of the ramp, completely out of control, and slowly, shamefully, drifted straight down to the canyon floor below, landing ignominiously right next to the river. Knievel survived, of course, but the spectacle was not a daredevil stunt. It was a sadly expensive, embarrassing, and very public science fair project gone wrong, costing millions in investment and shattering his myth for a moment. Number 9. The personal transport punchline. Dean Kamen and the Segway. Imagine you're an inventor, and you've created something so secretly revolutionary that you are convinced it will completely change the layout of cities, the dynamics of human transportation, and how people fundamentally live. This was the self-proclaimed vision of Dean Kamen, the creator of the Segway personal transporter. Kamen hyped his secret project, codenamed Ginger, so intensely that giants of the technology world, including Steve Jobs, predicted it would be bigger than the personal computer. John Doerr, one of the most famous venture capitalists in the world, said it would revolutionize human activity. The world genuinely held its breath, expecting flying cars, personal jetpacks, or perhaps a teleporter. What they actually got, after years of intense secretive development and billions in investment, was a self-balancing two-wheeled scooter, a glorified electric kickboard whose primary market turned out to be mall cops, enthusiastic city tourists, and people who found walking even a short distance too challenging. The Segway became an instant running gag, an ultimate symbol of overblown hype and under-delivered promise. The ultimate tragicomic punchline to this whole saga came years later when the owner of the Segway company itself, Jimmy Heselden, a millionaire who had bought the company with grand plans, tragically died after accidentally driving his own Segway off a 40-foot cliff near his estate in the UK. It was an ending that felt so perfectly, impossibly ironic that you genuinely cannot script it. The owner of the scooter that was meant to revolutionize transport died because he accidentally drove it off a cliff. The Segway's legacy is less about changing the world and more about providing a punchline to the world's most expensive joke.
Number 10. The Duel with the President's Cane. Richard Lawrence. If you're going to attempt to assassinate a sitting president of the United States, it is probably, for your own safety, best not to pick Andrew Jackson, a man who was already a legendary, notoriously violent tough guy long before he even stepped foot into the White House. But Richard Lawrence, a mentally unstable house painter, decided to try his luck anyway in 1835. The 1 in 125,000 misfire. Lawrence approached Jackson as he left the congressional funeral in the Capitol building.
He pulled the trigger on his pistol at point-blank range, a clear, immediate threat. Undeterred, Lawrence pulled out a second pistol that he had secreted on his person and fired again. The odds of two separate, completely functional pistols, carefully loaded and aimed at the same target, misfiring in a row, were later calculated by experts as an astonishing 1 in 125,000. But Jackson, a man who had survived duels, countless wars, and assassination attempts before breakfast, didn't wait for Lawrence to attempt a third try. The enraged 67-year-old president, a man whose temper was as legendary as his political success, immediately charged Lawrence and proceeded to viciously beat the would-be assassin senseless with his heavy iron-tipped walking cane until other bystanders and congressmen pulled him away from the pummeling. Lawrence failed spectacularly to make history as an assassin, but he did secure a footnote as the only man who received a history lesson and a physical beating directly from the president's cane in the middle of a political funeral. And that, in exhaustive, painstaking detail, is our complete chronicle of the 10 legendary failures, proving that monumental stupidity is almost an art form. But since the talent pool for this topic is shamefully deep, we know we missed a few classics, so go to the comments right now and tell us who is the single most outrageous idiot we forgot. And if you enjoyed judging these spectacular historical facepalms, please destroy that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the best, and inevitably the absolute worst, of humanity.